In California, after the end of the state eviction moratorium, a lot of landlords and tenants are feeling lingering effects. And in New York, a tenant learns exactly why rent control doesn't work. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have two interesting articles for you today, and one is coming out of California and the other one's coming out of New York. Now, these are two of the most tenant-friendly, landlord-hating places in the entire country. So I always get a lot of interesting stories and articles from these places, just going over exactly why I would never invest in these places, okay? So the first article, it's all about the lingering effects of the eviction moratorium and how, the California state eviction moratorium ended just at the end of September. So now there are going to be these effects that are going to be ongoing, and it's going to be awful for the landlords out there. The other story I have, it's a pro-tenant article, but I can use it as an example to kind of show you exactly why rent control doesn't work. But before I get into these two articles, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below, and let me know what lingering effects you felt during the eviction moratorium, the end of the eviction moratorium. Yeah, I'm sure that right now you're still facing some issues because of all the things that went through and took place, okay? Some people are just now finally getting tenants out of their properties, getting those places repaired and getting them back on the market. Other people still haven't been able to get rid of those tenants yet and are waiting for rental assistance. So I just want to hear what's going on with you. So the first article comes from kget.com and it says, "The Lingering Effects of the Eviction Moratorium." And let's get into it. Bakersfield, California. We continue our coverage of the eviction moratorium and its effects on our community. Today marks 11 days since the moratorium ended, and now new regulations are in effect, making more paperwork for property owners trying to oust unwilling to pay tenants. Some of the new rules is they have to actually request or submit on behalf of the tenant the reimbursement from the state and federal government to allow that to happen before they can go forward with the eviction. Lieutenant David Kessler from the KCSO Civil Division. So, yeah, they actually have to put in a request for the rental assistance before they can actually go ahead with the eviction. So that is a little stipulation that they threw on there, I guess to give them tenant a little bit more time, but it's really unfair for the landlord because, as I've pointed out many times before, in order to get the rental assistance in most places, the tenant has to submit certain documentation and the landlord has to submit certain documentation. So it doesn't matter if the landlord submits an application if the tenant doesn't want to cooperate. So the landlord still might not be able to get anything out of it. Okay, the second thing is that puts the work on the landlord instead of the tenant. The tenant is the one who's not paying, not the tenant is the one who should be doing this sort of paperwork. And for a landlord who has lots of tenants or even a few tenants who aren't paying, to have to go through all these additional steps, this is why landlords didn't want to participate in these programs in the first place. They make it so burdensome for these landlords that it's not even worth it. And from what I've heard in California, rather than even having to go through the eviction process, a lot of them are just paying these tenants to leave. Okay, they're saying, hey, here's 10 grand, here's 20 grand, get the heck out of here. And I don't want to go through eviction. I won't put an eviction on your record. I just want you out. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I hate that they're making it even harder for landlords to get tenants out of these properties. And that's exactly what it says here in the next paragraph. The new rules make it even harder to get tenants evicted, even if tenants withheld paying rent throughout the pandemic. Not only does the landlord have to give the 3-day pay or quit, but they have to get the unlawful detainer, and the judge would have to sign off on that before we actually see that paperwork, Kessler said. The rules say property owners can sue and evict their tenants for not paying rent starting this month if the owner first applies for rent assistance for their tenant or are denied the funds by the government program. But even so, KCSO has been issuing evictions throughout the pandemic. So you can only apply to evict your tenant if you've put in this paperwork, and then it's either been approved or denied. Now, that's completely ridiculous, okay? Now, I have no problem if they want to go ahead and pay me the rental assistance anyway, but then I'm still allowed to remove that tenant. Okay, I've got no problem with that at all. But I already know that that's not the case. If you take that rental assistance money, then you won't be allowed to remove that tenant. So they think they got you. They think they've got you in a position where you have to keep this tenant in your property. You know, you have to take this rental assistance money. Like I said, landlords that don't want to have to deal with that, they're just paying the tenants to leave, because that is the best way for them to get those tenants out of their properties. Now, my other gripe about what I just read is that it says that, you know, unless you are denied the funds, okay? So how long does it take them to, you know, adjudicate, make a decision on these rental assistance funds? Imagine you have a tenant in your property who doesn't qualify for the rental assistance program and is denied, but it takes them 6 weeks, 12 weeks, or whatever to deny the tenant. So you have to pay out of your pocket for that tenant to live in your property until they're actually denied. Then you can apply to evict them, and then however long the eviction process takes in California, be it a month or 2 months or whatever. So it could be months on end before you are actually able to get rid of this tenant who never qualified for rental assistance in the first place. We have so far processed 1,200 evictions since the beginning of the year, Kessler said. We should see a slight increase, but we've been doing evictions this entire time since the pandemic started. Property owners will be able to take their tenants to court starting April 1st of next year to get any rent not paid prior to October 1st. So yeah, property owners can't even take these tenants to court for the next 6 months to get that back rent that they're owed from these tenants. That's how messed up California has it for these landlords, okay? I've been telling people I wouldn't invest in California. Look how tenant friendly this is, okay? And when I say I wouldn't invest, I mean I wouldn't be a landlord in California. You know, I think the people who are flipping there, they're making great profits. I think the people doing the short-term rentals in the places where it's legal, they're probably making great profits too. But the long-term rentals, especially as a small landlord, it isn't worth it. Even with all the great appreciation you can get on your property, if you have to deal with these sorts of headaches, it just isn't worth it to me, okay? Lieutenant Kessler says it takes only around 2 to 4 weeks on average to handle the evictions. Essentially, having landlords house tenants for weeks, if not months, before they can be legally evicted. And that's on the best case scenario is weeks or months, okay? Once all the paperwork and all the different stuff, applications and everything that you're putting people through, I mean, who knows how long it could be? 6 months, maybe more. I don't know. Maybe if you're a California landlord, comment down below and let me know how long it actually takes to evict a tenant from your property, because I'm really curious. I don't think it's fast at all, and I've heard horror stories, okay? All right, and so the second article I have for you today, it's coming out of New York, right? And it's going over another one of my favorite issues, which is rent control. And yeah, as everyone knows, I am very, very opposed to rent control because it hurts the landlords and the tenants themselves. The ones who think they're getting a great deal on affordable housing, well, they're not. They're screwing themselves over. And this article says just that in it. So let me get into it. It's coming from ArkansasOnline.com, and it says, tenants become New York City activists, stop paying rent. All right, let's see what it says. It has been years since Patricia Edwards' top floor apartment in Brooklyn has felt like an acceptable home. When it rains, water leaks into the kitchen and living room. It also pours through a crack in the bathroom ceiling so big that Edwards needs an umbrella just to use the toilet. Still, at around $1,100 a month, the rent-regulated one-bedroom unit in Crown Heights is relatively affordable in a rapidly gentrifying New York City neighborhood where the median rent is more than twice as high. For 20 years, Edwards, 63, said she had almost never missed a rent payment. So let's dive into those last two paragraphs there, okay? So her place, it's in terrible shape, absolutely terrible shape, okay? And it's so bad that she has water leaks coming through her ceiling that are raining on her in her bathroom, okay? I mean, it is awful, okay? And then she mentions that, hey, guess what? I'm only paying $1,100 a month rent for this one bedroom unit in a popular New York City neighborhood. And guess the reason why is because it's rent regulated. There's rent control. And she's able to keep this super low rent for darn near ever. Okay. So she's complaining. She's not happy because all these maintenance issues are occurring. Well, why do you think these maintenance issues are occurring? It's because the landlord doesn't make enough money to actually justify doing proper maintenance on the building because it is rent regulated. Okay? The rent control itself is to blame for this place being in bad shape. And while you think you're doing good, you're only paying $1,100 a month, you're living in a dump. You're living in a place that is absolutely atrocious. And the rent control is the reason for that. Okay, if the landlord was receiving the rents that they were supposed to be receiving, they would be able to make the repairs, they'd be able to make the upgrades, and the units would be very, very nice. But no, I mean, this is what rent control does, okay? And for the people in the cities that are under rent control or that want to put rent control in place, like Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota, this is what's going to happen to your housing stock. You're going to end up with landlords who aren't doing updates, aren't doing a lot of the maintenance and repairs, who are just barely keeping these places patched together. The tenants are going to be living in dumps. Complete dumps, and they're going to be paying low rent, but they're not, the landlords, since they're not able to make a profit, they have to cut corners everywhere else. And that's exactly what happens. So I'm not going to read the rest of the article. It's a very tenant friendly article, but I just wanted to bring that point out and read, exactly something. And this tenant, she probably is 100% clueless too of why her place is in such bad shape. Okay. She has no clue that her rent money isn't enough to maintain this probably extremely expensive property and pay for the maintenance and keep it in good shape. That's common sense though to everyone else. It completely goes over her head.